Hello again, friends. Welcome back to the www.plaidavenger.com. We just don't want to hear the news, we want to understand the news. And man, has there been a hell of a lot of news of violent nature coming out of Afghanistan and Pakistan for the last month solid. It keeps increasing in violence as every day passes. Attacks on Pakistani military, attacks on U.S. NATO forces, the Afghan government getting ready to collapse, the Pakistani government threatened. And threatened by who? The Taliban, al-Qaeda, Pashtuns, ethnic groups in this Af-Pak border zone of chaos. That's why we want to go back to try to understand the peoples of this area, what they're fighting for, what they're fighting about, so perhaps we can all understand the situation much, much better. That's what we're here for. Let's call this one Af-Pak Insanity, Borderline Chaos, Part 2. The peoples. We talked about places last time. Let's talk about these peoples and these different identification and labels for different peoples in this Af-Pak borderline chaos insanity area. Now, to start with, let's throw out a couple of terms that are meaningless in this Af-Pak border area, and those are the terms Afghani and Pakistani. Those are national terms, meaning you are a citizen of a sovereign state, right? So you live in America, the United States of America, you're an American. Right, we got that. In Pakistan, you live in Pakistan, you're a Pakistani. Cool. If you're in Afghanistan, you're Afghani. That's cool too, except in this big blue zone of chaos, nobody, and I mean nobody, buys either one of those terms as meaning shit. Hardly anyone would identify themselves as a Paki or an Afghani in either side of the border in this blue zone. These are different peoples. They are by default in sovereign states, but many of those people have not ever accepted they're in sovereign states. Part of the reason they're fighting against those sovereign states. But maybe I'm digressing already. So Afghani versus Pakistani, it may mean something in parts of those countries. It means nothing on the Af-Pak border. Not to people, not to the peoples there. To the peoples there, ethnicity is much more important. Tribal ethnicity, if you want to even think about it in that term. That you are connected to a bigger group of peoples like you, of like culture, and perhaps like history. That is the trump card in the Af-Pak border. Who gives a shit about being Pakistani? They're of Pashtun descent or Balochi. So let's look at some of these ethnic groups, tribal/ethnic groups in this Af-Pak border and try to understand what they're all about. For starters, just for starters, let's throw out some easy ones. If you look at northern Afghanistan on this map, you'll see that there are lots of different ethnic groups in the northern side of Afghanistan. Ethnic groups that are attached to kind of other countries around them, like Uzbek ethnic groups, Kazakh ethnic groups, Turkmen ethnic groups. You dig what I'm saying? Even Kazan. These are different ethnic groups that are located primarily in the north, scattered perhaps out through other parts of Afghanistan, but mostly in the north. You may have even heard these referred to as Northern Alliance. That some of these groups had an alliance back when this war started a long time ago. Now that's the north. The south is much more interesting in Afghanistan, and of course it's related to northern Pakistan. And the groups of note down here are the Balochis, down in the southwestern part of Pakistan and southwestern part of Afghanistan. The Balochi or Balochis are a separate ethnic group from the Pashtuns. The Pashtuns you see in kind of the north central part of Afghanistan and Pakistan. And quite frankly, the Pashtuns are scattered throughout parts of northern Afghanistan as well. And this is kind of a belt of different ethnic groups and religions, mostly Muslim, which also kind of stretches all the way up to China. Maybe you've heard reference, of course, in Plaidcast past to the Uyghur groups in northwestern China, another Muslim group of Turkic ethnic background. All of these groups are Islamic. All of them are mostly Sunni brand Islamic. And what I want to point out by pointing out these kind of bookend ethnic groups around the Pashtuns is that in China, Uyghurs aren't really radicalized in terms of being radical Islam that wants to go blow up the world. They are much more fighting for cultural identification, recognition, and maybe just for some respect from the Chinese government. Perhaps a separate sovereign state, but that's not really on anyone's map that's going to happen. Down, we look at the Balochis, down in southwestern Pakistan, and bleeding over into Iran. Balochis' ethnic group is in Iran, Pakistan, and southern Afghanistan. These folks have been actually quite suppressed by the Pakistani government. There's oil in this part of Pakistan, so the government's been wanted a piece of that action, and they've kind of suppressed the local population. And so there are some radicals within the Balochi tribes, or Balochi ethnic group, but not radical Islam. Those folks, like the Uyghurs, are fighting for identification of their ethnic group. Perhaps for more rights, perhaps for a separate state, but at least some more resource allocation within Pakistan. They haven't got a fair shake. The reason I point that out is Balochis, the Uyghurs, maybe even some of the northern ethnic groups in northern Afghanistan, none of these groups has really embraced the Taliban or al-Qaeda. None of these groups has wide open embraced Osama bin Laden or radical Islam or terrorism or actually even harbored the Taliban or al-Qaeda. Why is that? The why is that, and the why behind a lot of the conflict in this Af-Pak border of insanity lies with the last ethnic group that we're going to spend most of the rest of this podcast on, and that is the Pashtuns. Maybe we should call this the Pashtun Plaidcast. I want you to know the Pashtuns. I referenced them at the end of the last Plaidcast on places. The Pashtun ethnic group is the primary player in all of this chaos. No offense to my Pashtun friends. I just want to talk about you so that people get what you're all about. And hopefully the U.S. government and NATO and maybe even the Pakistani government will better get what you're about so they can see the futility of a lot of the conflict that's going on. The Pashtun ethnic group. First place is first. One of the biggest tribal / ethnic groups on planet Earth, perhaps 25 million folks would identify themselves as Pashtuns, and they're split. That's part of the problem. They're split, of course, between Afghanistan and Pakistan, split by that Durand line we talked about last podcast. So they're on opposite sides of an international border, of which none of the Pashtuns recognize at all. Again, none of the Pashtuns would ever call themselves Afghani or Paki, or very few of them. Okay? Now, this group is extremely fiercely independent, is much more tied to its local ethnic flavor than any sort of nationality. They are a very tight-knit group that for 1,000 years has had a very distinct culture to go along with their ethnicity and their Islam. And this can kind of be summarized in a single term that's called Pashtunwali. That sounds so cool. Pashtuns following Pashtunwali. Wow, that's a mouthful. What the hell is that? It's kind of, and this is Plaid Avenger verbology here. Pashtunwali is kind of an all-encompassing definitive code of the Pashtun. It's the way of the Pashtun they've had for 1,000 years that identifies pretty much every aspect of their life. How they live, how they behave, what they think about religion, about God, about death, about politics, about justice, about revenge, about honor, everything. I mean, it's really kind of a code of what the hell these people are all about. And it's a code that's extremely strong. It is their self-identification. It's the ego of the Pashtun that must be protected and saved at all cost. And that's part of the reason for the conflict now. Because, let me back it up for you to try to get you to understand. What is it that's so different about the Pashtuns? Why is it that the Pashtuns are swelling the ranks of the Taliban and perhaps harboring al-Qaeda operatives, which they are? The Balochis aren't, the Uyghurs aren't, the Kazakhs aren't, the Pashtuns are. And it's because of this Pashtunwali. So again, let me back it up. What's so different about the Pashtuns as opposed to the other ethnic groups in this Af-Pak border of insanity?